Good morning. I'm Sister Pam Beal, and Sister Anne Marie Lum is here with me this morning. Sister Anne Marie is a member of my religious community, the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. She is a spiritual director and the coordinator of our community's House of Prayer. She's here with me today to talk about a Zoom series called Spiritual Companioning with Others in Discernment that we are going to be starting in November. So, Sister Anne-Marie, first of all, welcome. And before we get into the details about this new Zoom series for young women that you will be starting in November, would you share with our audience a little background about the ministry of a spiritual director and how you came to be one?
Thank you. Yes, I will, and I'm glad to be here. I guess you could summarize the ministry of spiritual direction as listening for a meaning under words or events. And what I mean by that is I listen, people make appointments to see me, and I listen to what they're saying and try to see how God may be working in this. So some examples. Someone may say, this Bible passage means a lot to me, and they tell me what scripture passage they're referring to. So I might ask further questions as, what memories does that recall for you? Where have you heard that passage before? And then I find out it was perhaps at a parent's funeral. So now we can go to, how is that grief working in your life? So many times, all of us start out with a statement, but there's more to the statement. Sometimes we know there's more. Sometimes we don't even know. There are feelings under that. So my job is to listen and to see what may be going on beneath the feelings. Another example might be a loss of a job. Someone is let go, their company is downsizing or whatever. So they might come full of grief or full of anger. So one of my things in spiritual direction I could do is say, what do you think God could be inviting you to do? Maybe they've always wanted to try something else and they never had the courage to do it. Here's an opportunity. So also trying to point out opportunities for God to work in people's lives. And there are lots of other things that we do in spiritual direction. And until you've actually been in spiritual direction, you wouldn't understand any more about how that works. But I invite you to try it. It's a wonderful experience, and it's a good experience of self-care as well. Now, how did I get to be a spiritual director? When I was finished with my college work and my religious formation work, there was a sister put in charge of helping me to find a program for a master's degree. So she consulted a priest who told her, and this is 1985, that spiritual direction would be a need in the future. And he advised the program of a master's in spirituality, applied spirituality, at the University of San Francisco. And I was sent there. I was blessed to be there and fell in love with the ministry of spiritual direction and helping people to grow. And then I had a further blessing, a 3-month internship in Toronto, Canada, on Franciscan spirituality and particularly Franciscan spiritual direction. So I've been blessed with wonderful opportunities, and I love the ministry, and I've been at it for over 20 years now.
Thank you. And thank you for that explanation, because I think spiritual direction sometimes can be very, very hard to understand. And I think you're right. Your examples were great. And then it's one of those things I come and try it and see how that goes. So thank you for sharing that. I know that in your ministry as a spiritual director, you have a special interest in working with young women who are discerning a call to religious life. And this Zoom series sounds like a perfect opportunity for young women to meet and talk with others in discernment. So can you tell us how this idea developed and what one of those discernment evenings that's coming up in November would actually look like?
Sure. I've been working with Sister Julianne Sheehan, our vocation director, and I see at any one time between 5 to 10 young women, professional women, usually over the age of 20, who are discerning whether God is calling them to religious life, to the consecrated life. And when I talk with these women, most of them are on Zoom because they're not usually in our geographical area. But the common thread I've picked up over the last couple of years is I don't have anyone to talk about this with. I don't have anyone my age. I can't talk to my friends because then they start not inviting me to places because I might become a nun, and that might deter people. So how do we keep this call, this discernment alive in today's work environment, today's college environment? Who can people talk to? So I discussed this with Sister Julianne, and I said, I think we could offer a community on Zoom where young women could talk to each other about their call and some questions that they may have. Sometimes you need to talk to people your own age before you would necessarily talk to me, or they think they're afraid to ask. It might be a difficult question. It might be what they consider a stupid question, and there is no such thing as a stupid question. But sometimes we just need a little companionship our own age. So as we sat and planned for the year, we decided, for starters, we would do 4 Thursday evenings, 3 in November. So the first 3 Thursdays in November, then we'll break for Thanksgiving, so we won't have a session. And the last session will be the first Thursday in December, which would then bring us into Advent, which is also a good time for discerning. We're going to start at 6:30 Central Time, and each session will last between 1 and 1.5 hours. What will that night look like? Before time, I will email the gospel for the coming Sunday to each person who is registered. I will give them several questions to ponder. Maybe they'll have their own questions and they won't use those questions, but at least it's a springboard. Then we'll begin the meeting at 6:30 Central Time. We'll discuss a bit about the gospel coming Sunday, coming weekend. And then I'm going to turn my microphone and my camera off. I'm going to leave the meeting so that they can discuss with each other freely anything they want to talk about. Is this happening in your life? What are you doing when someone asks you for a date? How do you deal with all this? Those would be all things to share with people your own age or people who are in discernment. And then I'll set a time when I'm going to come back on. We'll answer any questions that may have come up that they would refer to me. And then we're going to have a night prayer. And Sister Pam, who's interviewing me, is a liturgist, and she develops beautiful night prayers to allow us to close the evening in peace and in beauty. So we will have a formal night prayer right from the Liturgy of Hours atmosphere. And that's what's going to happen, as far as I can see, unless something else would change, that people need something else. That's how I've dreamed about it.
Thank you. Thank you for being so detailed about that. In case anyone is listening and wonders what that evening will be, it's very clear from your answer. Thank you.
One more thing, if I can interrupt you.
Sure.
I would want to meet you before we ever have you in the group so that I can talk with you. So when you register, Sister Julianne will give your name to me and I will set up a time to meet with you. So if you have any further questions, I'll be there to answer them.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. This year, our community of Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity decided to do monthly Zoom interviews with people that we feel are rebuilding Christ Church today. And I think sometimes we forget that the sisters who live among us do that every day. And obviously, Sister Anne-Marie, you're a very great example of that. So can you just share with us your insight into how you see your life as a religious woman and a spiritual director helps to rebuild Christ Church today?
Well, I'll tell you what my experience is. Each morning when I pray, I ask God to use me, that I am trying to do God's work, and I am happy to be an instrument that God can use to rebuild certain qualities that I think we desperately need in our society. One is a rebuilding of trust. We don't know who to trust, and we don't know how to trust people. We don't know if we should believe them or not. So giving people a sense of there is someone you can always trust, and that is God. You can always trust God. You can always trust God's word. You can always trust Jesus's message. So I try to build on that a lot. People's confidence. Sometimes I encounter people who really aren't sure of themselves and they just need a cheerleader. So I try to build them up and build God's church that way. Rebuilding love. And that would go along with respect and courtesy and a general understanding that people are good and we are all made in God's image and likeness. I try to create atmospheres both personally and in my professional life where people are free to explore their doubts, their fears, their questions of faith, their life, and they're not going to get criticized or I'm not going to do name calling and that kind of thing, but to create an atmosphere where people feel respected. Once a person feels respected themselves, they tend to respect other people. Some people have a fear that they might make a mistake and God is not going to be happy with them because they might make a mistake. So I encourage people that God honors our free will and God is with us to guide us. So trying to build up the person, a spirituality, a sense of trust and safety and confidence is how I see my ministry and my community life at this time.
Thank you. Any advice before we close this morning? Any advice for young people as they listen to us this morning and they find themselves discerning their call in life, whether it's a call to marriage or single life or religious life or priesthood? Any word for them this morning?
My number one message for people is you don't have to do this alone. In fact, the very act of discernment is a communal project. So you don't do this alone. We have a survey on our community webpage, and we're going to provide you with that link that will ask you questions, and according to your answers, will help you decide perhaps what life you are called to. I ask you to talk with your family. Nobody knows you better than your family. And in my family, as each girl or guy brought home the dates, the family had comments later on whether this was a suitable person. So your family knows you. If you don't have a good, positive relationship with your family, you have a trusted pastor, someone on your church staff, seek spiritual direction, seek counseling, if that would help you. So the discernment process is a communal process, and that includes choosing the single life as a life stance. Choosing the married life. How do you look for a marriage partner? What do you want your dating situation to look like? Priesthood, either in a religious order or a diocesan priest. Consecrated life, contemplative life, or active life. All of those options can be explored, and it can be done with people that you trust. So you don't have to do it alone.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good advice for all of those calls that people might be discerning right now. Thank you so much, Sister Anne Marie, for taking the time today to share not only your ministry as a spiritual director with us, but also telling our audience about the Zoom series for young people to meet and talk with others who are doing just that discerning in their own life. And as Sister Anne Marie said, please be sure to check the chat bar that is here, and then that information will also be provided for you on our website when this interview appears. So thank you again, Sister Anne Marie, for all you do serving God and his people, especially young women discerning God's call for them. May God continue to bless and energize the good work he is doing through you every day. And thanks to all of you for taking the time to listen to this interview. I hope it's given you a better understanding of what spiritual direction is and opened you to exploring that possibility and that opportunity in your own life. Have a wonderful autumn day, everyone, wherever you are.
Thank you.